Hey everyone, welcome back to Tactical Magic. This is Molly Mandelberg, your host, and I'm very excited to bring some big magic, some deep, slow medicine to the podcast today with a dear friend and colleague of mine who has so much wisdom to share. So hang tight for just a sec. We'll be right back. It's not just about mastering technology. It's not just about brand or messaging. It's not just about making more money. It's about showing up in a big way so your people can find you. This is about bringing your most wild and authentic self into the hustle and grind. Welcome to Tactical Magic, a business strategies podcast for the warrior goddess entrepreneur. So Marita Esteva's lineage is Zapotec, Purapecha and Sephardine, and their metaphysical and spiritual training includes work in the Lakota, Mayan, Aztec, Apache, and Hopi traditions. Chosen for the medicine path before birth, Marita has trained their whole life. It is with the permission of their elders and teachers that Marita has created circles, trainings, indigenous breathwork techniques, and more. They are also a ceremonial cacao farmer, maker, and teacher, as well as the head pastor of Malama Honua Farm Church and nonprofit, created to help rescue animals, feed local communities, and tend to land restoration. Welcome to the show, Marita.
Hi, it's been a minute, huh?
It's been a minute. I'm so glad to have you back. So I just want to start by acknowledging the being that you are in the world. I know I talk to a lot of leaders, I talk to a lot of spiritual people on this show and in my life and in my business. And the presence that you carry in the world and the just ripple effect of being willing to like honor your deepest wisdom and shine that out and share it in such big ways is just really inspiring. And I'm really grateful to know you and to know that you're doing the work that you're doing in the world. So I just want to start by saying thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way. So it's good to hear it back.
Yeah.
And thank you for being one of the people that helped me get it out there in kind of the beginning phases. We all need help. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Marita has been on the show, I think once, maybe twice, but it's been at least 2 or 3, maybe 4 years since we did that. So a lot has changed. Tell us just a little bit about what you're up to and what you're creating and doing right now.
Yeah, when we first met and when I first started this, I was in the beginning stages of learning how to communicate indigenous wisdom that was thousands of years old to modern day society. And it's taken me about the 4 or 5 years to figure out how to do it in a better way because you're always learning. And part of what I have realized as I've sat with this, as I've continued studying as well as I've become an elder and wisdom keeper and the lineages that I've studied, earned, of course, is that wow, there is a huge gap between cultures and generations, and it's something to be aware of. I don't think many people talk about it. I've also found that I'm kind of in that pendulum swing in the middle of things. I'm not an elder who lived their whole life in the jungle and all of a sudden decided to come out and have conversations with people. And I'm not someone who is I'm not mainstream. So walking that middle path has been challenging because so many people want indigenous people to act a certain way, look a certain way. As you can tell, I'm not in ceremonial gear. And they forget that a lot of the wisdom that we teach is relates to how we live. And so I've learned how to use better imagery and how to slow things down. I wanted to go a lot faster. And I'm finding that slow medicine is the key, that it takes people just that step from mainstream life into indigenous way of life is some people take 6 years, 2 years. I have someone who's been studying me with for 5 years and they're still like, wow, it's just dropping now. It takes that amount of time because you have to live it, because it's deep relationship, because it's not wisdom it's wisdom, not information and facts. And so just recognizing how the Western world teaches, what the value system that it has, how it's so different from indigenous teachings and indigenous ways is like, wow, now I have to teach that. I have to teach like, oh, by the way, I might say a certain word, and because I'm saying it in a language that you understand, I don't mean the same thing though. So I've had to, when I started my podcast, discovering that I had to redefine a lot of things, words that are used in a lot of communities, and we use it in a very specific way, such as even relationship, the imagery of relationship, right? And what does that mean? And relaunched my cacao facilitator class, and I was one of the first people doing facilitator classes because I was seeing what was going to happen, and I wanted to teach people old ways, but old ways that you could figure out how to do in modern society. And what I realized, and I think this is a big takeaway as we go into slow medicine, is many people have been taught to gain things, right? Accomplish things, keep things, right? Hang things up on walls as certifications and this and stuff like that. And there's always a search for the thing that's outside of you. And yet, even though we talk about deep intimate relationship and knowing thyself, it's always you're fragmented in a way from Western society. And I was teaching on the other day, and I dared them to be like, okay, that's great. We're going to slow down and you're going to get to know cacao. But you need to let cacao know you. It's reciprocal. And a lot of people, when they think of reciprocal relationships, they're like, oh, well, how can I help? How can I do? It's out of always action outside, 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 outside. And they don't know how to receive, right? In a very different way that's not Western. So that has been a huge learning curve for me to continuously learn how to speak of the vast differences between cultures. And I don't say it as like, oh, your culture is wrong. It's just like, be aware. Be aware that you are walking into not just a cultural exchange, but into really indigenous reality, like native reality. It's alternate. It's like I call it alternative reality. It's
Mhm.
very, very different.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that highlighting that in this culture, in many cultures, in just society in general, at this point in time, we are not taught how to receive. And that it isn't the same as somebody paid you 20 bucks and you put it in your pocket. Like that, yes, you received that $20 maybe, but receiving and the potential within learning to truly, deeply actually receive is such a huge catalyst for change in our lives and actually allows us to be in communion, which is when we're gifting and receiving, it's happening simultaneously, where it's no longer transactional. Oh, if I give them a compliment, they'll give this back. Or if I give them my time, they'll give this back. Where it's actually like the moment you receive, the other person is receiving as well. And the moment you contribute, the other person is receiving and contributing back to you, that there's this different level of being when we actually know how to receive, and that we can be with people differently, we can be with our environment differently, we can be with the planet differently. Like that's such a just like huge awareness shift that is so special to be teaching people how to do. And yes, of course, it's going to take time because we're having to like deprogram like centuries of systemization of like programming that has devalued that and has like bred it out of us almost. Yeah. So I'm
Yeah, and I
curious.
think yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious, what are some of the ways we can begin looking at the world through that lens, or begin like considering what slow medicine is and how to notice that it's time for some of that?
I think one of the things, I had a conversation yesterday with indigenous Polynesian woman who teaches how to talk story and how to tend to story. And I think one of the greatest things that we can learn as we enter into alternative reality is it's not about telling story, it's about tending story. It's not about as you said, give and take, but it's about being known. And I think that's one of the hardest things for Western people to even have a concept of like to literally be known, right? We all love the moon, right? Everyone's doing moon stuff. You see it on Instagram, the moon and the moon rituals and stuff like that. But I'm like, does the moon know you at your deepest core? Does the moon know what you like, what you dislike? Does the moon know what favorite color you have? Does the moon know the song that you used to sing when you were 5 years old and you used to dream? Does the moon know like those dark secrets and thoughts that you like don't want to tell anyone? Are you known? And I find it intriguing because there is this desire to be seen, to be recognized, to be known, but it's curated, right? It's this curated idea, and it's not a knowing, but yeah, it's what we yearn for. And so part of slow medicine is recognizing all of the stories, all of those programs, right, that have defined you and what you're living out of, and be curious about them and be like, do I have to continue doing this? Who taught me this? Why is this relevant? Why is this a tradition? Is it what was a tradition born out of, right? And so I think people have to really get really, really curious. My advanced students, they're always like, where are we going, Marita? Where are we going? And I'm like, you need to know yourself completely, like physically, biologically. Like, do you get hangry at what point? How much water are you intaking? Like the biological responses, because we have a body and we have to take care of that body, right? And we have to get to that point that our body, our mind, and our essence are speaking the same language, that they're in dialogue, that they're having the same conversation, that when you're out exploring or thinking, that your body wants you back because you are a good caretaker of that body, right? In that kind of a deep relationship, not that fragmented relationship. And that's why when I started to see, again, when I start to see something and be like, oh, this is going to be something big across around the world, I want to create something that's indigenous, because it's about to be taken like Dunkin' Donuts. Let's just run and do everything. And that was breath work. And so I introduced, with the help of my teacher, an indigenous breath work, which is really about being here now in this present moment, and starting to learn about this fragmentation that has happened through centuries of time of colonization, right? And colonization, the best colonizer, I mean, there's a lot of amazing colonizers out there, unfortunately, but going back to the Romans, right? And the Roman Catholic Church and how they use religion to colonize. And so a lot of people forget that they have to go that far back to start questioning, right? What their whole life has been built. Like, oh my God, I have to go back to the Roman times. You're like, yeah, yes, unfortunately. And fortunately, unfortunately, for those of us who are living in lands that are not our own, who have been persecuted, who have identities that are persecuted, we know we don't belong. And so we never we've never believed the lie that we belong and that we're free. And so being able to recognize who you are, where you are, and are you all your parts speaking the same language is such an important way to start a dialogue. And so much of what's being created out there is, I just call it Catholicism, Christianity rebranded. A lot of the spirituality that is out there is righteous. That's not indigenous spirituality. Righteousness, if you one way, my way, that's not many ways. So if you come from a foundation of colonization, and if you haven't done the work to even be curious about it, then you will build based on that foundation, because that's why you have to stay curious, right? That's why in the circles that I've trained all my life, but every time that I train and I go to a new teacher, they're like, you need to start from scratch. I don't care that you're a wisdom keeper. I don't care. And it's actually beautiful, because I'm like, oh, thank God, I don't have to carry that right now. I can ask questions. I can be curious. I can see the different imagery. And yet the Western world does not want to give up what they know. They don't. It's too scary because they think that what they know is who they are.
Yeah, it returns back to that deep desire to be known and like the I will die if I'm actually vulnerable enough to be known.
Yeah.
Which comes up in so many places in like sort of the separation, the depression that people are feeling, the isolation, the like way like romantic relationships are in society right now, the like epidemic of lack of connection or lack of caring or lack of accountability, like all of that is this lack of connection to what true intimacy is, and that to be vulnerable is to have deep connection. And when we avoid that vulnerability, when we avoid knowing ourselves and being vulnerable with ourselves, even there just is a wall up between us and other people, between us and nature.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also one of the things that has to be addressed is and be let go is the need to be right, the need to correct, the need to always like for me, when I think of curiosity, right, it's like it has potential. Curiosity is about potential. Yet so many people, when they ask questions, they're not curious. They're asking the question because they're trying to get their needs met. They're trying to get you to tell them, say that thing that they want to hear so they feel justified. So even learning how to learn or learning how to ask questions, learning to not hold on to anything is really what the way of a wisdom keeper is. You earn that title, and that title is earned through years and years of study, but it's not because all of a sudden I mean, I have multiple PhDs. I mean, I kind of do, but it's like in the ways that we are taught is like you will never stop learning. And so to be a wisdom keeper is to be one who keeps, who tends to wisdom. I tend to the seeds of wisdom. I in me and in others. It's very different, right? Very
Yeah.
different
Then
way.
saying I know something and I'm right, and that's why you should learn it from me. Yeah.
Yeah,
And like, what a relief to just be like in the curiosity of what's
yeah,
true right now. What about this is relevant? How,
yeah.
like, what piece of what I know can be questioned or can be like evolved into this moment? It becomes like a exploration instead of a static point of achievement.
Yeah, but you're someone who lived van life. So for you, it's an easier transition, right? You know,
I
to
do appreciate an ever-changing reality, yes.
yeah, and a lot of people don't. So that's something important to know. If like meeting that part of yourself that does not, want to be curious, then just accept it. You don't have to challenge it all the time. Just be like, I'm good. Okay.
Yeah.
Then be good where you are at. And I
Yeah.
think so much we come from the striving and driving that we don't allow people their lesson. And I think so many people out there, so many coaches and whatever people are calling themselves these days, is like they're teaching that one lesson that they learned. That's your lesson. That's great. But not everyone is born to have that lesson. No
Mm.
one is ever going to be you. So it's important for these voices to be out there, but to not say, I have so
The
many,
answer. Yeah.
I've done it already, so you don't have to do it.
Right.
No, don't take away people's lesson. And that's what a lot of people do. You take away people's lessons. You see that with parents and children. In any sort of relationship, you can take someone's lesson away from them.
Yeah.
Then you just added to you. You added to your, well, let's call it karma for right now,
Yeah.
because you took it away from them. And people don't realize that. And I feel like a lot of healers out there do that. They take away people's lessons because they're like, oh, but they're hurting. And I'm
And
like,
that doesn't actually help them though, because as
yeah,
soon as you take that away, they have to go and recreate a scenario to learn that because they were being
exactly.
called to that lesson and you just bypassed it for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like a huge lesson out there because I know there are coaches and healers listening to this podcast. It's one of the hugest lessons as a facilitator to recognize that your job is not to take it from them. Your job is not to do it for them. Your job is to help them acknowledge that they have the capacity to choose that healing, to choose that change, to choose that lesson. Like,
Yeah.
that's your job, is to help create the container for them to get it, not to do it for them or shortcut them. Yeah.
Yeah, and what I like to do also in a lot of my containers is give them tools, like teach them
Yeah.
to fish. Sure, they come in hungry, so you give them a fish at the beginning, right? And then you teach them how to do it. But I find that because a lot of the Western world has been taught that you're supposed to feel a certain way when you have something, right? Oh, I learned it, or I had a discovery moment, or it's a feeling sensation, right? They say that. And the Western world has taught so much of people about ease in the sense of easy, like the lack of discomfort, right? I can have ease in my life and still have a lot of discomfort, right?
Yeah.
I can have neutrality, and that doesn't mean I'm gonna put hands off. Neutrality is an active state of being, right? And so I think a lot of these words, especially in the spiritual community, have to be redefined, because a lot of them are just scapegoating. And what you're creating are people who can't hold medicine. So many people come and ask me questions or study for me for periods of time, and then they can't hold medicine because they don't understand that who they are is the lesson, and they're trying to escape from themselves. Right, Marita, I need to know, heal me or get this. I don't want to feel this way.
Mm-hmm.
Why is my life falling apart? I'm like, oh, well, good job. Congratulations. Why are you saying that? I'm like, well, because it should. You want change. Your life has to fall apart. Your life. And I tell people, I put a warning at the beginning of all my work. Like, the minute that you say yes to stepping on a path with me for a minute, for a while, it will be challenging, because you're asking to literally enter from one reality where how things work into a completely different reality where you know nothing,
Yeah.
and you want to excel. And the sickness and the disease is in your world, and it contaminated our world. And this world will always seek to dominate the other one. So it's like having a conversation with someone the other day, or even with my wife, we talk about this a lot, is like, if you are a non-Indigenous person wanting to learn from Indigenous people, number one, a lot of the things that they're teaching out there are children's stories. They're not teaching more than that, because that's where most of Western culture is at, like a bedtime story to just kind of ease things. But then people want more. And there's this thing that people have to be aware of if you were trained in Western culture, is that you will have the terminators inside of you. There is a switch on in there that at any point will deny Indigenous wisdom and seek to overthrow it, because it's been bred into the person. And so realizing that you have that, and then actively working to talk to it with humility, to talk to it with kindness, right, is something that a lot of people aren't ready to do, to really walk with that shadow side of yourself, not cut it off, and learn from it, and have compassion for it, and have compassion when you have been a perpetrator as well as when you have been perpetrated. Like, you have to be able to look at that you have the potential to do that. And a lot of people don't have a big enough pot to stir all that medicine in. And so it takes them time. And so that's why recognizing that these things take time, and teaching people takes time. And I've called this slow medicine for a long time. And so, and I know there's a book out there, some doctor wrote it a few years back, but this is indigenous slow medicine. It's a different way of walking. It's a different way of being. It's a different way of breathing. And this is another thing. I live like this. I'm not just speaking at it because I went on a weekend somewhere, but I've grown up in this, and I've grown up in multiple cultures. So fortunately, I have a big pot and multiple spoons, because I was taught to love diversity. I was taught to learn from diversity. I was taught that challenges mean that you are testing yourself to see, wow, how amazing of a human being can I be in this time and space, right? Instead of being like, oh, I'm tested. Ugh, you know?
Yeah, another lesson.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Or I did something bad. It's
yeah,
like, no, you're asking to grow. Stretching at any point can be painful at
yeah.
times.
So
Because-
slow
mm.
medicine is a container that people can come into now. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So it's 18 months long because I was doing 9 months and people were like, they didn't want to leave. They didn't want to leave. And so I was like, okay, I sat down with everything and I kind of brought everything around full circle. So it's 18 months and it's not just lectures, right? It's going to be a lot of workshops. So you're going to be planting, you're going to be out there doing projects, you're going to be building things. And so the first years we're going around in the circle and a lot of people teach the directions, but I'm teaching them. So it's going to be different. And so you're going to be building and learn from the directions. What is actually the intelligence of the East, the South, the West, and the North? Why do indigenous people go to these directions? Not just for where go right or left. Why? What is the sovereignty of the East? What is the sovereignty? What is the intelligence of the South? And sit with it and learn from it and the animals and the colors and the minerals that are sit in those places, and you sit with them and you talk to them and you learn from them and you create. We're going to be building toponis and stuff like that, and at the end of that you'll have 6 more months where you'll be building a medicine wheel for yourself, so you can go and sit and do. You're going to be building a sacred fan. You're going to be building sacred rattles and stuff like that. So again, you're not going to go into just Etsy and buy something and be like, hey, look at all the cool indigenous stuff. You're going to be building it. And to build it, you're going to have to be building relationship. You're going to have to be asking. You have to be wondering, be like, why? Oh, I want a Raven fan. Have you gone to talk to Raven? What does Raven have to say to you? Does Raven even want to work with you? And don't Google what Raven medicine is. You get to know it by observing. And that's very indigenous. It's by observation, right? How do they move? How do they walk? What do they do? How do they problem solve? Thank you, Raven, for coming into this and learning from it that way, and then having them learn from you. So it takes a while to build relationship. And so, yeah, we're starting in March and I'm super excited. And it's one of those funny things that people ask for it, but then you have to remind them that they asked for it because they're like, oh my God, 18 months, Marita. I'm like, it goes by really, really fast.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I've had a
yeah.
6-month program for like 5 years now, and people kept asking, like, what's next? And just like taking the same 6-month program over and over again. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
let me figure out what's next. What's the year-long version of this? But it's fun. I mean,
Yeah.
it's fun to recognize that people want to be on their ride and that they're there to keep learning what you have to keep revealing with them. So I love it. So
Yeah.
we'll
And
put the link in the show notes for anybody out there who wants to check out slow medicine. You can also go to the Path of Ish, that's ix.com. That's where all things Marita live. I also want to say, if you've enjoyed the magic of this episode so far and you're on TikTok, go find the Path of Ish on TikTok. And I mean, we're kind of out of time, but I also just want to give it a moment for Cuatro Manos y Cinco Volcanes. Did I say that right?
volcán. Yeah, Cuatro Manos y Cinco Volcanes. Yeah, cacao farm. Yeah.
Yeah, you make
Yeah,
cacao.
I do.
It's really hard for me not
In
to
Sarah,
say cacao every
yeah,
time. Cacao, cacao.
yeah, made in ceremony for ceremony. We're the only lineage keepers making on the island of Hawaii, so that's pretty special. Like, go check it out and why things are different. And I know we're out of time, but I want to say one last thing. I think as we enter into the new solar year for the Maya, as we enter into a stable year, it's 12. 12 allows us to move from the neutrality of 11, where last year was all about, it was 11A, which was all about looking at your path. How did you get there? What are you walking? What are you doing? Making choices. 12 this year, 12A, and the next one are really, really important years, hence also 18-month program to get you ready for that next step, to build everything that you've been working out, that things have been falling apart and rebuilding. This is a good year, really stable year to build and to learn, because it's the Nahuatl of knowledge. So if you have been looking to get into anyone's class, right? If you've been curious about anything, whether it's Molly, myself, or someone else, like this is the year to learn. This is the year to switch from knowing, right? And just, I have to have, right, to growing. So I hope that we will find ways to all grow together as we continue on this path in a good way.
Yes. Oh, thank you for that.
Mm.
Awesome. Well, so grateful to have you on the show. I always just feel more grounded after we connect. So happy to be back in your orbit. And yeah, again,
Hi.
just so grateful for everything that you are bringing forward. And on behalf of someone who was raised by a lot of colonial lineage, yeah, thank you for turning some of the tide on what wisdom is actually being broadcast out in the world and helping us find our way back to, reciprocity and centeredness and connection.
Especially now with AI, everything's just repetition of this, what something someone wrote one day,
Yeah.
it's all over and over. So
Yeah.
we're
All
here
right.
for it, right, baby? Say
Oh, hi, kitten. Awesome. All right.
bye.
Well, thank you everyone out there for listening. We're super grateful for you. If you dug this episode, share it with a friend, leave a review, follow whatever you want to do to support the show, and definitely go check out The Path of Ish and check out Slow Medicine. See if this is the journey that is meant for you right now. And if it is,
Mhm.
leap. As always, keep asking big questions and taking bold action because you are here for a reason. See you next time.